Hi, I'm Jeff Strand, and I'll be reading an excerpt from my nonfiction book, The Writing Life: Reflections, Recollections, and a Lot of Cursing. I'll be reading from Chapter 6, The Desire to be Published No Matter What. When I started, I had an insanely inaccurate view of how the industry worked. I thought that if you'd published a book, you were a full-time author. All those books on the shelves at my local Walden Books, RIP 1962 to 2011, were by people who had no other job except to write more of them. This in itself, though very, very wrong, is not a completely deranged perspective for a newbie, but I took it one step further. I thought that those who wrote for the small press horror magazines also did this as their sole source of income. I didn't think that they were living in mansions and picking caviar out of their teeth with diamonds, but I thought that if you wrote book reviews for Cemetery Dance, that was your day job. Obviously, this logic doesn't hold up at all. The budget would be astronomical. And what's important to my overall point is that I knew the logic didn't hold up. It didn't make any sense that a small press niche black and white magazine had a budget of several $100,000 to pay their contributors, but surely the reviewers weren't doing this in their spare time, right? I was very much aware that it made absolutely no sense that somebody's entire workload for the entire year was to write a few book reviews. Yet instead of thinking, that can't be right, I thought, damn, these people won the day job lottery. I had no access to those reviewers, so that I could ask, hey, is that how you make your entire living? And they could laugh hysterically at me for a solid 45 minutes. I shouldn't have had to ask. Of course they weren't sustaining themselves this way, but I wanted to believe it, and so I did. Later, I would write a couple of reviews for a small press horror magazine for which I would be paid $0 and 0 cents. In fact, despite having a Bachelor of Fine Arts in Creative Writing, I had virtually no interaction with published authors. Almost all my classes were taught by unpublished student teachers, including one who shared the tale of how she'd written an angry letter to an editor who dared send a form rejection after requesting a full manuscript. Here's some advice that's cheaper than a college education. Don't do that. One of the instructors had published a small press poetry collection, and the other instructors fawned over her, as if breathing the same air could grant them just a fraction of her awe-inspiring success. I left with a diploma and absolutely no clue how the biz actually worked. I didn't interact with any published novelists until around 1994, with the life-changing decision to go with the online service Genie. It didn't have graphics or games or porn, but it had email, oh my god, a chat room, whoa, and discussion groups, holy shit, including a private one for the members of the Horror Writers Association. Suddenly, I could talk to real writers. They'd published books I'd heard of. I'd even read some of them. I soaked up vast amounts of wisdom, but I also raised an eyebrow when somebody made a comment about how writers, in general, didn't make much money. Wait, what? That didn't match up with my fantasies. Even now, there's a lot of incorrect information about the financial side of writing out there. In rare cases, it's on purpose. I remember a particularly arrogant author whose achievements do not match his ego sharing that a small press advance could be as low as $5,000. If you get a $5,000 advance from a small press, you are comparatively a millionaire. Small presses often pay no advance at all. His intention was to give the impression that he was doing so well in the small press that he couldn't even imagine an advance lower than $5,000. But when I was with Leisure Books, a new author they'd signed emailed me because he read an article in the newspaper that said first-time authors could get advances as low as $10,000. His advance was a quarter of that. He wanted to know if he was getting completely screwed and if signing the contract was a mistake. I assured him that while, yes, he was indeed getting screwed, he was getting the same advance as other new leisure authors. The newspaper article was simply inaccurate. A co-author of mine and I were about to do a call with a Hollywood producer. I thought it was important that we be on the same page, so I, having little to no pride, said, we're going to take whatever they offer, right? Because it could just be a token payment for the option. When movie people buy the rights to books, they almost never just flat out buy it. They option it, meaning they pay you a small fee for the exclusive rights to buy it before the contract term expires, giving them 1 to 3 years to try to raise the budget and put the project together before they have to shower you with cash. If Steven Spielberg calls during that time, you have to tell him to fuck off. Usually the movie people aren't contractually required to buy the rights until the first day of production. My co-author agreed, but he also noted that another horror author had bought a house with his movie option money where the projects never got made. No, 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 I screamed via email. If he went into the call with that attitude, he'd have a meltdown when they offered us the not uncommon option fee of $1. The days of massive option fees are over, and you have to go into something like this with reasonable expectations. If we made this call thinking we were going to buy half a house each when it was over, we'd be devastated when we got $1, which we had to share. The producer changed his mind, canceled the call, and we didn't even get to split the dollar. Authors don't like to talk publicly about the low pay. When self-publishing exploded, you heard from the people who were raking in piles of gold, but not the authors who were underwhelmed, giving the impression that everybody was getting rich. There's a very useful group called 20 Books to 50K where authors frequently share their exact royalty amounts, but you get way more updates from the authors who are beaming with pride than the ones who are disappointed. It's very easy to look at one's own perfectly respectable royalties and think, wow, I thought I was doing okay, but I guess I'm not. Similarly, the authors who say, hey everybody, let's all share how many books we published this year. Those are the ones who have books well into the double digits, not the ones who spent a couple of years working on their last novel. It can be very inspiring, but also disheartening. So, there's incorrect information out there and a lot of data that can be misleading because it skews so much toward the really rich fuckers. But let's backtrack. During my time on Genie, I sold my very first short story for professional rates. It was to a horror anthology that wanted the most messed up stories you could come up with, and I was going to get 6 cents a word. The story was Kiss My Guts, a tale that I will call regrettable. It was gross and vile, but not fun gross and vile. It was witless, mean-spirited, and unpleasant. Still, the dude accepted it. I made my first professional sale. To be paid on publication, yeah, but still, I'd sold a story for professional rates. Shortly after this, the president of the Horror Writers Association issued a warning about the anthology, explaining that the editor was a 19-year-old kid who was offering contracts and pay rates without actually having a publisher attached to the project. Seeing an official warning from the HWA did not make me say, wow, that's good information. I'm glad to have this insight into the unstable nature of the book. An informed author is a happy author. Instead, I thought, why are you making a big deal out of this? Why are you trying to diminish my accomplishment? I'd already excitedly shared my news. This was embarrassing. The anthology never did find a publisher, which at the time was kind of a bummer, but is now a huge relief because it would have added Kiss My Guts to my permanent record. No matter what else I accomplished in life, there would always be that lingering reminder that I was the author of Kiss My Guts, and it would sadden me. And if you're thinking, now I really want to read that story, first of all, tough shit. And second of all, I'm not saying that I'm ashamed of its level of grisly depravity. I'm saying that it's low-quality grisly depravity. It's a poor excuse for a story, and the literary world is better for the anthology having turned out to be the work of a 19-year-old who didn't know what he was doing. That was a brief excerpt from The Writing Life, Reflections, Recollections, and a lot of cursing. Thank you for listening.